So now that we've covered how to do a confidence interval for a paired sample, we're going to talk about how to do a hypothesis test. We're going to be doing the exact same 5 steps that we've been doing for every hypothesis test, keeping in mind that the main steps that change are steps 1 and steps 3. And step 3 is on your formula sheet, and so you're able to use that to help you do your calculations. So let's go ahead and first talk through our big first step that changes, step 1. So in our null hypothesis, we've always had this equal sign when we have a number show up, and that's no different here. We still have this equal sign. We're having that mean difference of the population is equal to 0. What that then is telling us is that our null hypothesis is that there is no difference between our two groups. Now, when it comes to our alternative hypothesis, notice we have the same symbol and the same number. Again, all we have to choose is the sign that's going to go between those. Now, how do we choose our sign? Well, here there's actually 2 things we have to worry about. In every other hypothesis test, we've just had to read the question to figure out which way to point our sign, or if it was a not equal to. We might see like words of decreased or increased or has something changed to let us know which sign to use. That still is going to be important for us, but there's an additional thing that we have to use that we've never had to consider before. We do also have to consider now the order of subtraction. As an example, go back to our Kroger and Walmart example that we talked about. So if I did Kroger minus Walmart or Walmart minus Kroger, that's going to make a difference in things. Pretend for a moment that my goal is to show that Kroger has higher prices. And that's what we want to test. And so a lot of times students will read this higher and automatically assume it's a greater than sign. But it matters which way you did your order of subtraction. If I did Kroger minus Walmart, and I want to see if Kroger has a higher price, the first number then will be bigger than the second number. And so here, I would then say that mu d is greater than 0. However, if instead my order of subtraction is Walmart minus Kroger, and I again still want to see if Kroger has higher prices, if my second number is bigger, then my mu d will actually be less than 0. So that's where that order of subtraction will make a difference for us on what sign I may choose for my alternative hypothesis. And we'll make sure we talk through that with our examples. So again, step 1 is our first big change. Step 2 has not changed, so we'll go ahead and write that one down. So we're still going to reject the null hypothesis and instead believe the alternative hypothesis if our p-value is less than our significance level. So that has not changed. In step 3 is our other big change. We first have our conditions. First, notice that these conditions are the exact same that we saw when we did a confidence interval as well. So it is the exact same conditions. So there's nothing really new to talk about here for conditions. What is going to be different is our test statistic. Again, because our population standard deviation is unknown, that's why we're going to be using a t statistic instead of a z. Now, if you remember our general form when we do a test statistic is we take our sample value. In previous notes, we've just used y bar. But in this notes, we're using y bar d because we're going to take that sample mean difference. And so again, it's no longer just the mean, but it's that difference mean. Then we subtract off whatever number shows up in our null hypothesis. Notice here that that number is 0. And although I know subtracting 0 off does not change anything, I still like to write that -0 as a reminder of where I'm technically getting this number. So that number is coming from the null hypothesis. And then we divide by some standard error. And just as we've seen before, we have the idea of s over the square root of n. The only difference here is that s has that d subscript on it to again say that it's the sample standard deviation of the differences. For step 4, we're calculating our p-value, which generally involves us going to StatCrunch to get the p-value. Based on our p-value, going back to step 2 to make our decision, and then do our conclusion and interpretation. In the next video, we'll do an example of this.